It's week 29 and this is your language arts video on Monday. We're going to just be reviewing some of the literary techniques that we talked about before spring break this week before we get into our big project that encompasses weeks 30 to 36. I'm really excited to tell you about that next week. But let's just review one of the literary techniques that we talked about was personification. And personification is when animals are given human-like characteristics or inanimate objects, or given the ability to speak or act human. And a great example of this is Beauty and the Beast, where the teacups and the teapot, the candlesticks, the clock are all given human characteristics and can talk and interact the way humans would. This is another book that uses personification that I wanted to just share with you for fun today. It is called Animals Should Definitely Not Wear Clothing. And you can see it was a very much loved and favorite book of my children. I want you to try to guess what each of these animals is wearing before the page comes on, okay, as you read the text. Again, these animals are given human-like articles of clothing, and well, they are given human clothing, and so this is a technique of personification. Animals should definitely not wear clothing because it would be disastrous for a porcupine. This was the illustration that was on the cover. Because a camel might wear it in the wrong places. What do you think the camel is wearing? Hats on his humps instead of his head. Because a snake would lose it. Slithering right out of that pair of pants. Because a mouse could get lost in it. Because a sheep might find it terribly hot. A wool sweater. Because it can be very messy for a pig. Because it might make life hard for a hen. That's my favorite illustration. Because a kangaroo would find it quite unnecessary. What would the kangaroo find unnecessary? Something that humans would wear. I thought an apron with pockets, but the coat's better. Because a giraffe might look sort of silly. Because a billy goat would eat it for lunch. Because it would always be wet on a walrus. Because a moose could never manage. Because opossums might wear it upside down by mistake. And most of all, because it might be very embarrassing. Yes, if you went to the zoo and found that the elephant was wearing the same outfit as you, yeah, that might be a little embarrassing. So that's personification. Some of the other things that we talked about are similes and metaphors. Similes, of course, are the comparisons that use like or as. And metaphors make the comparison directly and just don't eliminate words like and as in making the comparison. Symbols are another big technique used by authors and by poets, filmmakers, lots of different creative people use symbols. And then the final thing that we talked about were idioms, which are those kind of funny expressions that people in one particular culture might understand, but don't really make a lot of sense literally. So those are idioms. I want to share with you another book. It's called Langston's Train Ride, and it's about the poet Langston Hughes. He was a black poet during the Harlem Renaissance, where black former slaves and children of slaves began to really find their creative voice, and they developed poetry, writing, jazz music, all came from this amazing era in the 1920s when the freedom that black individuals began to enjoy really led to this flowering of creative expression. And so this book has lots of examples of some of the literary techniques that we've talked about. I want you to just listen. I'm not going to give you close-ups of the pictures. I might hold it up for you, but mostly because I want you to create pictures in your mind. That is what each of these each of these literary techniques make the words come alive in your mind. Okay. So the author tells us at the beginning of this book that in this story, I wanted to capture, he says, just one thing, the moment when Langston Hughes came to believe in himself as a writer. The details of this moment and the wonderful poem, The Negro Speaks of Rivers, that he wrote that late afternoon are unique to the life of Langston Hughes. But many people have experienced something similar, the realization that they can achieve their dreams. And my hope is that Langston's Train Ride is not only a historic retelling, but also a beacon for other young people with a dream, that you can believe in your dreams yourself. It's Sunday afternoon in Harlem, and 125th Street is alive, swarming with people, jumping, jiving. I'm home. I love walking these streets, the faces, the men in their sharp Sunday suits, the girls in their dresses, the color of bright, hard candy. The vendors' voices like a rhythmic beat, a whir vibrating in the air. Everything I see speaks to me, to me. Here it shows his city street in Harlem. I want you to think about what techniques you saw in that. 125th Street is alive. Is the city really alive? Of course not. That's a personification, right? He compares the girls' dresses to bright, hard candy. Okay? And voices like a rhythmic beat. There's the simile. The comparison of dresses to bright, hard candy is a metaphor, but voices like, using the words like or as, is a simile. It's like their voices of the vendors calling out to people is like a rhythmic beat, like a drum. Okay? Everything I see speaks to me. I'm on my way to one of the best days of my young life. Look out, Harlem, I'm coming through. My first book of poems out at last. I've got to make it to a party where all my friends are waiting just for me. I scat a little half dance on the sidewalk. Yes, I am a poet. I know it now, but there was a time when I wasn't so sure. Not so sure at all. My heels click faster and faster on the sidewalk, and that sound pulls me back to that time, not so many years ago. I drift back, and back some more. Clackety, clack, clack, clack. Yes, I'm riding the rails. With my head tilted against the seat, I listen to the sleepy click of the train wheels. Did you notice the personification in that line? Sleepy click. Do train wheels get sleepy? No. Okay? But he's giving them a human characteristic. Personification. Resting my feet on the still bar in front, happily, I gaze out at the soft blur of trees through the dust-flecked window. It's 1920, and here I am, all of 18 years old. High school is behind me, and I'm traveling to Mexico to visit my father, who lives there. My father who left us to fend for ourselves when I was just a little boy. The train rumbles south and west, bumping and swaying, past green fields dotted with grazing horses and thin streams that dart suddenly out of the woods. from Ohio into Indiana, little towns with white steeples and lazy stations. Here and there at the edge of one of these towns, the tar paper shacks or broken down sheds where my people, the Negro people, live. Start out with nothing sometime, my grandmother liked to say, and see how long it takes you to work up to something. Riding along, I remember my grandmother who raised me. I loved her pride. I loved her free spirit. I loved the stories she told me about her first husband who died fighting to end slavery. One time she showed me his shawl full of bullet holes. I think of others too, the black men and women in my church who cared for me. My Auntie Reed, who cooked wonderful apple dumplings with butter sauce. And all the black folks I'd met while working in an ice cream parlor in Cleveland. They came north with nothing but their brave thunderclap laughter that said, no matter what, I'll keep on going. And what does he mean by their brave thunderclap laughter? He's making a metaphor there, isn't he? Comparing their laughter to the clap of thunder. He's so strong, so powerful, so hopeful. We are not giving up. We are going to keep going, like the sound of thunder in his mind. And he makes that comparison without saying their laughter is like a thunderclap. He just calls it thunderclap laughter. The train rolls on as the sun starts setting over endless rows of Illinois cornfields. And then very slowly we're crossing a long bridge. It's the Mississippi River, far below with the beautiful golden light shimmering on it. The trees on the farthest shore seem ablaze. Something deep inside me stirs. I feel more awake than I ever have before. Looking down at its wide, dark flow, I think of what this river means to my people. Slaves worked here on boats in nearby fields alongside the banks, stacking sandbags to hold back floods. Some slaves were sent down the river, too, to be worked to death on the meanest plantations. I even remember that Abe Lincoln once traveled this river on a raft, all the way to New Orleans, where he saw a slave auction and learned to hate slavery. Whoosh. Words and phrases come rushing into my head. The names of other ancient rivers bubble up. African rivers, the Congo, the Nile, the Euphrates. Suddenly, 3 words. Just 3. But I know I have to write them down. How? Where? I snatch the envelope with my father's letter in it and turn it over. Who cares where? Just write. On the back side with a little stubby pencil I always carry, I write the words, I've known rivers. My thoughts roam. Suddenly I feel the history of my people flowing right up to this moment. To me, yes, I feel I've lived other lives on those muddy riverbanks. Somehow, somewhere, I've heard the dusky waters of all those rivers lapping and singing. It's true, I've known rivers. I keep the envelope flat on my lap. I'm madly scribbling words down now, rapidly one after another. Poems are like rainbows, don't you think? They escape if you're not quick. There's a simile for you. Poems are like rainbows. I turn my head to get one last look at the sun-tinged Mississippi, going, gone, and I scrawl the last line. My soul has grown deep like the rivers. And the poem is done. Carefully, I place the envelope inside my coat pocket. Mustn't lose this, no way. I sit there gazing at the reflection of my face in the glass, reciting the poem to myself over and over and over. I lean forward and press my nose against the window. Everything is gathered up in one huge darkness. But as I stare out, I see a few tiny dots of light balanced on the edge of the horizon. Questions keep coming into my head. Am I really a poet? Is it possible? Can I sing my America too, as other great poets have sung theirs? Can I? Then, as I watch the far-off flickering lights, a very tiny voice inside me answers, softly but firmly, yes. It says, yes. Yes. I settle back in my seat and the wheels hum. The car sways gently on and on. Suddenly, I hear the staccato street sounds again. A large crowd of people is waving at me. I arrive in front of the shipwreck inn. Langston! Someone shouts, sit down and sign some books. So I do, still feeling the rhythm of that long-ago train ride under my feet. And a friend calls out, Langston, read some poems. Read some poems. I turn to the river poem. Everyone is still. As I read, I remember the glinting sun on the Mississippi and the train wheels turning, and how that poem flowed into my soul like an ancient river of love for my people. Rivers, I think, maybe we're all part of a big river that flows from way back to here, and from here to who knows where. The Negro speaks of rivers. And here's Langston Hughes' poem, I've known rivers. I've known rivers ancient as the world and older than the flow of human blood in human veins. My soul has grown deep like rivers. I bathed in the Euphrates when dawns were young. I built my hut near the Congo when it lulled me to sleep. I looked upon the Nile and raised the pyramids above it. I heard the singing of the Mississippi when Abe Lincoln went down to New Orleans, and I've seen its muddy bosom turn out golden in the sunset. I've known rivers, ancient, dusky rivers. My soul has grown deep like the rivers. Langston Hughes. Langston Hughes is one of America's great poets, the author says in the afterword at the end. He was born in Joplin, Missouri on February 1st, 1902, but he grew up in several places in the Midwest, including Kansas, Illinois, and Cleveland, Ohio, where he graduated from high school in 1920. While in high school, Hughes was both a class poet and a star performer in track. Although Langston's father, who lived in Mexico, tried to discourage Langston from becoming a writer, the young man began writing and publishing poetry at an early age. One of his first and most well-known poems, The Negro Speaks of Rivers, appeared in 1921 in the magazine Crisis. During the 1920s, Hughes spent some time in New York City, where he was part of the Black American movement known as the Harlem Renaissance. He published his first volume of poetry, The Weary Blues, in 1926. Many poems in this book are written in a blues, jazz, or slang style that was always one feature of his work. As a newspaper columnist, Hughes created a very popular character named Simple, whose witty and wise pronouncements on American and especially African American life appeared in newspapers for 25 years. During his lifetime, Hughes received many fellowships, awards, and honorary degrees. When he died on May 22nd, 1967, Langston Hughes was recognized as a fighter for justice and a poet whose work would stand the test of time. And certainly it has. For one of your action items for this week, you get to write about two of Langston's poems, including Dreams and A Dream Deferred. They are under action item 29.2, I believe. For 29.1, you can write a poem of your own using some of these techniques. For 29.3, or the easy action item, just tell me what you know about similes, metaphors, what personification is, and what idioms are. I think these are wonderful techniques that you may utilize in the big project that you work on next week. So stay tuned for more instructions on your big writing project that we'll do to finish up the year. And we'll catch you for one last history video tomorrow.